Hey there, this is Cole with some programming notes. This is the first of 2 episodes about The Stand, covering up through about chapter 45 or so. We're going to be talking about the rest of the book during the next episode in about 2 weeks, and then after that, we are beginning our coverage of Wizard and Glass. So if you're going to be getting either any of the books that we've talked about during this off-season or Wizard and Glass or the other Dark Tower books, consider doing it through the Amazon links at Duckfeed.tv/tipjar. We get a small cut of the proceeds from whatever you buy there. It's like an affiliate kind of thing. That's an easy way to support us. The other way is patreon.com/DuckFeed.tv. Go there, check out the details. That is a way to support this effort more directly. Now, let's dig this stand. Welcome to Radio Free Midworld, a podcast about the Dark Tower series of books by Stephen King and the related works. My name is Cole Ross, and I'm your host, and today I'm joined by Autumn Greer.
Delighted as always.
And by Evan Jones Thorne.
Hello, hello.
And this week we are beginning our discussion of The Stand, which is a very early Stephen King novel, actually. In my head, I didn't think this was, super late, but this is kind of a magnum opus outside of things like, It, or things like, The Dark Tower itself. It was like his 4th book, his 5th book.
I always forget that, and that's insane.
This is the one that was designed to be like his, what do you call it? Like his Lord of the Rings, right? Like his Americana great Tolkien work.
Yeah, he said that, but he also is kind of ambivalent about how successful he was at doing that. But you can definitely see it as like this travelogue kind of story with a Sauron figure, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I would say so.
Yeah. So we should really begin this the way we usually begin these things by throwing it to the other hosts. Like, what is your experience with the book, Autumn? What's your history with this one?
I guess you could say that I have 2 histories with this book. We talked about how a lot of people that you've had on the show have read books when they were probably a little bit too young to be reading them. I tried to read this book so young that I realized that I shouldn't be reading it.
Oh, boy.
Like I got to the part in the first... Yeah, the first I was probably maybe 10 or 11 years old, and it was the biggest, thickest book from my parents' book club that was on the bookshelf. And I went and I pulled it out, and, we get maybe 10 pages in, and we have dead people with, like, black tube necks and, a dead child. I mean, it was pretty gross, and I was like, I put it back on the shelf, I walked it back, and I probably pulled out, like, Charlotte's Web because that rat was really cool,
He's voiced by Paul Lynde. Yeah. Yeah.
So probably a few years later, after I got Stephen King fever, I went back and read it. And I have to say, this is probably the most influential Stephen King book for me. I picked my college major in milking cows because I was like, well, you got to have a practical skill for when end times come. I mean, I guess realistically, I probably should have turned into a prepper or something, but I just didn't want to, sit around and jerk off about how much pemmican and how many bullets I had in my house, so.
Right. Yeah, you
milking cows is the next best thing.
You didn't want to have to rotate your stock. Like, oh, we're having beans today because they're about to go off.
Exactly. So hands down, this is probably my favorite Stephen King book. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's obviously some problems, some unevenness here and there, but overall, hands down, this is the best for me.
Yeah, I have a lot of. It really rings a bell for me when you talk about like, oh, I just wanted to pick the thickest thing that I could, because I'm young, and that is the that's the value that I perceive in books to a certain extent.
I'm sure that's exactly how Harold picked his books as well.
Oh, indubitably. Evan, same question for you. What's your history with this?
Man, I had a very different experience with this book. I actually didn't read this until I want to say until I was about halfway through the Dark Tower, and I just kind of needed a breather after probably Wizard and Glass, if I had to guess. And so I went for a nice relaxing jaunt through the Stand.
Oh yeah, you know.
Fuck me, I guess.
just a little amuse-bouche, an aperitif. Yeah.
But I had friends in high school who just raved about this book, and I was really excited. I didn't know anything at all about it except for the cover. And I really would like to talk about the cover a little bit, because my experience with this book has as much to do with the picture on the cover as with anything inside of it.
So you're referring to the classic version that has the two hooded figures scythe fighting in the desert? Like a very dramatic like sword fight almost.
And
one of them's a bird person.
And or like a Black Plague era doctor.
Right.
Like that's what they wore back then.
Yeah, the big beak masks.
So I went in not knowing anything except for that picture, and I was expecting like maybe not high fantasy, but I was expecting at least a sword fight. And
you didn't expect it to be like straight up modern day.
Really. No, not at all. And like, even if it was, I think I expected it to be more in line with, I guess like Rose Madder, where it's like it takes place in modern day, but then there's other elements to it as well.
Yeah.
Like some like anachronistic stuff going on. I did not expect it to be like a mid 80s post-apocalyptic, opposite of a sword fight book.
Yeah.
And because one notable feature of this book is that there is no scene anywhere in it that even remotely resembles the cover art.
Mm-hmm.
At least when you're like 15 years old and not super great with metaphor and symbolism and stuff.
Right. And they've only gotten worse. Like there's one cover that's just a dude like with a gritted face biting down on a bullet, which doesn't make any sense even thematically. And I think a more recent one has like it's just like it's a street with a bunch of bodies in the road, which feels a little bit closer.
Yeah, that's at least in the ballpark.
Yeah. So, despite the fact that there were no cool desert sword fights, did you like what you found inside?
Oh yeah, it's great.
Okay, cool. My history with this, like a lot of Stephen King, I came to this very late. This is the first Stephen King book that I read outside of On Writing. And I chose it specifically because in On Writing, he talks about, he has a couple of specific stories about things that he's written, but he talks about like a difficult decision that he had to make in the story to get himself unstuck, after everybody had kind of settled down where they end up settling down. He felt like he wrote himself into a corner, and he talks about, doing something and killing off all these major characters in order to like thin everything down to get to the final part. And I, when I was looking at and thinking about starting Stephen King, there was a little bit of that, what Autumn talked about, like, oh, well, just give me the thickest book you got. But also like, I just wanted to see how that was put into place. Now I'd be lying if I said that this wasn't also related to the fact that Fallout New Vegas was coming out. And I knew that part of this had to do with, part of the stand had to do with crucifying people outside of Vegas in the desert, which also happens in that. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read this and have this nice little synergy. But yeah, this is the first Stephen King that I read. Then I immediately went into the Dark Tower and then immediately read it. So
fantastic. Which version did both of you read when you read it for the first time?
Expanded.
Okay.
Yeah. Evan?
I honestly don't remember. I want to say it was probably the original version, just because it was on my dad's bookshelf and had the original cover.
Yeah.
It was like a great big hardbound. I've been trying to remember which version I read at that point, and I got nothing.
Yeah. Do you remember the kid?
I don't specifically from the first time I read it.
Okay.
That's kind of the Leaves of Three, Let It Be, right? Like, you remember the kid?
Yep.
The old edition you didn't read. Like, right?
Yep.
I didn't get there.
It only works
My
for
heart was in the right place.
It only works for specific dialects on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Yeah. Leaves of Three, read some more? I don't know.
I want to say that I read the original edition because I'm going through my my trusty Wikipedia synopsis again, and I do not. I feel like the scene where Stu find the kid's remains and call him the Wolfman. Mm-hmm. I feel like I would remember that if I'd read that as a teenager. I feel like that would have stuck with me somehow.
And Autumn, you read the...
Oh, I read them both. I probably read the 1990s version a lot more. That's probably the one that I've read, 30 times or something like that. Mm-hmm. I was going to say one piece of trivia that came up in a few different things when I was, doing my homework, so I would sound like I knew what I was talking about on the podcast. Mm-hmm. Was that one of the reasons that there are two versions is because Doubleday physically was not able to print much more than an 800-page book because of the way they did their bindings, glue versus cloth. They could not do it like a 1,200-page book. So that's what drove a lot of the editing changes.
Yeah. In the opening essay of the expanded version, King writes and says, yeah, they gave me, it was like an economics choice. They told me, okay, if the book is going to be any bigger than this, we have to charge more for it, and that's more than the market can bear. Yeah. So it's funny. It's funny how that works. I should give some basics on the book just so we know where we're proceeding from, because we're getting into a little bit of this. It was published in 1978, and the expanded, updated version that we're talking about came out in 1990. The summaries that I'm providing here are going to come from the expanded and updated version. I don't even know if it's possible to get a hold of the old version now. And also by trivia, there was a version that they put out in the mid 80s that updated some of the cultural references, but didn't restore any of the missed material. And this is a book about a superflu that wipes out the majority of the population and kind of sets the stage for this battle between good and evil that happens afterward. It's a very Christian story. Like, it is very much God and the devil that are at work here. The villain is referred to by the by by the new pope, I guess, as Satan's imp. And so that's a little bit of the cost of admission is getting into this and not finding that hokey. That expanded edition and what King took out of it, like, he did the editing himself. Like, he, rather than let somebody else do surgery on his baby, this massive book that he was really proud of, he went back in and performed the cuts. And so, it wasn't really a matter of like somebody else looking at what King did and making it a more focused thing. Like, all of this, both versions reflect his intention in both of these cases.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had asked this in an email, and I don't know if we'll have time to really get into it too much, but have either of you read the short story that this is based on?
No. You're referring to Night Surf, which is a very strange.
It is a very strange name. It's also an interesting story. It's not my favorite. It's very early in his career, but it's interesting as kind of a peripheral artifact to this massive book.
Right. When you say early, like, this is 1969 is when he initially wrote and published this, and that is also a story about a superflu. I don't think it's not clear what it did to the population. As compared to this, but it relates to this group of teenagers going kind of all Lord of the Flies, trying to arrange like sacrifices and stuff to, to cure themselves or to ward off any more flu.
Yeah, and it's one of those. It makes a lot more sense after you read The Stand, which is strange because it was written before. So when it came out, you could not have put it in that kind of context.
Right.
I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I was just curious if either of you had read it, but if not, there's not a whole lot to talk about, really.
No, unfortunately I hadn't, and that's a little bit of an oversight on my part. And all of the research that I've done leading up to this, I never actually knew there was a story that it was based off of.
I found it years after I read it.
Autumn, did you get in on that?
I actually have not read that story either. It's interesting to know because after Evan had emailed about it, I'd looked it up and kind of read a summary, which I guess is the next best thing to a short story. Trimmed off an extra 5,000 words, right?
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that he was. I guess maybe continuity wise, it fits. I mean, it could just be happening at the same time that our protagonists in The Stand are doing stuff. There's these kids on this beach getting wild.
Yeah. Just getting a little rowdy, ignoring the call and just setting up their own struggle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, we don't have gas money. We're not going to Las Vegas. Come on. Just hang out here.
Yeah. There are plenty of people
I was
sacrificed.
Surprised. I read a couple little lines in an interview, and I didn't really find a source on this, but apparently Stephen King was writing a fictionalized version of the Patty Hearst kidnapping. Did you guys see information on this? I guess he thought that Patty Hearst kidnapping and the way that she was kind of turned and started, like carrying a weapon and robbing banks along with the SLA. He thought that only a novelist could, kind of figure out the motivations behind that. And he was kind of getting to a dead end on it. And apparently there's another incident, the Dugway incident, where some Army nerve gas was released and killed a whole bunch of sheep. Mm-hmm. So while he had hit writer's block with his Patty Hearst kidnapping book, he kind of came up with a concept for The Stand and broke his writer's block on that side.
Yeah. But the Patty Hearst incident specifically provided inspiration for Randall Flagg because of one of the leaders of the SLA, the Symbionese Liberation Army. DeFries, I think is his last name. Like he was fixated on one of the only known photos of DeFries, like during one of the bank robberies, where he was just kind of this figure whose face was entirely cast in shadow, and that is a huge thing about Randall Flagg in this book is those descriptions of his appearance in The Nightmare, but also his portrayal in this book as like this political dissident.
Because we do see little moments where that character is involved in like KKK rallies. I think they actually mention the name Donald DeFries, right?
I believe so, yeah. And that's not the only character who's actually based on other stuff. Like the kid, the person that we talked about before, that is a character who King has come out and said, like, yeah, that is based on Starkweather, the Daniel Starkweather, like a teenage spree killer from the like the mid 50s, like late 50s, I think. It's like he served as like the basis for a bunch of spree killing movies like Natural Born Killers and stuff like that. So he cribbed from real life monsters a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So this is a massive, massive book, and we're not going to cover in the detail that you're used to. Like it would be a whole season of the show to do that, and that is not necessary, I think, to cover the themes that relate to the tower. However, the biggest feature here and the most memorable thing, at least for me, let me know if you disagree, is the characters. And we're going to spend the first episode here kind of talking about them as they, react to the superflu plague and then start journeying toward their destinations. And I have untangled them, especially in the first book of this, called Captain Trips. Everything kind of jumps around, to different parties and different locations. I've just taken that and put them linear. So we're not spending time, shifting gears. that aside, we should talk about the real meat of this. How about that miniseries?
I actually still haven't watched it.
No?
No. I haven't seen very much of the Stephen King adaptation catalog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I haven't seen that. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the Tommyknockers. I haven't seen. I think I've seen The Shining and 1408, and that might be literally it.
Right. Yeah, I would say definitely at least fix it and watch like the first part of the miniseries. It's 8 hours, so that's a lot. Like, it was aired over the course of 4 days, and obviously that, that's a better way to do it than putting out like 1 2-hour movie and saying, well, let's hope this gets all of it. But it's got a hell of a cast. You have Gary Sinise, you have Rob Lowe, Matt Frewer plays Trash Can Man. Yes, you have Max Headroom wandering around the desert.
All right.
Yeah. Autumn, do you have affection for the miniseries?
Oh, I love the miniseries. I mean, we've got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the guy, the soothsayer that rings that bell and says that everyone's going to die.
Yep. You have Kathy Bates
as as the radio person.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think that the real standout for me in the miniseries is whatever guy they had control that crow. That crow trainer brought his A game to the miniseries. That crow is landing everywhere. He's messing up gates. I mean, that's a smart ass crow.
Yeah, it is a very good crow. That is some real that is either a very smart crow or it's some like Blue Velvet level mechanical bird action they got going on. Yeah. It's real cheesy, the miniseries is, because it's, made for TV, and like some of the gnarlier aspects of the story, you can't do that on television. Proceed to get slimed. But I think that it's interesting to see those visions of the characters. And it is a good and digestible way to at least get the broad strokes of the story. However, they do, combine different characters and eliminate the other ones entirely. Et cetera, et cetera. So, don't take it as like the canonical version of this. It's not a distillation. It is more of like a, like a vertical slice almost. Yeah. So let's talk about what this has to do with the tower, and with the Dark Tower. This was written and published before even the first Dark Tower story, I think, was put out. The first chapter of the Gunslinger. So a lot of the connections are kind of retcon, and they updated and added more in the 1990s version as he started getting a better idea of where he wanted the tower to go. Like the Eyes of the Dragon, this gives some more perspective on King's kind of antagonist, Randall Flagg. And this story is actually where Flagg debuted, outside of some vague references to the idea of a dark man that had popped up like in a poem that he wrote in a diner several years earlier, etc. And while Walter was originally supposed to be his own character, Wizard and Glass and kind of the books that came afterward retcon him into being, just kind of this other manifestation of Flagg serving the Crimson King, the kind of Satan figure in the books themselves. So let's talk about Flagg and the way he's presented here, because it's really hard. I don't know. I was about to say it's really hard not to like him, but like he's not a likable character one way. It's hard not to be engaged with the way that he is presented.
We talked a little bit about some of the name dropping that they did around his character. I think that really serves to give him a lot of gravitas. Like, he feels like a worthy foe, even though he's presented in just a plain humanoid aspect, and even has some weird myopic, like can't see some stuff that's going around him maybe a little bit later in the book. He still feels like such a worthy adversary.
It's really funny how toward the end of this book you have a cult of personality that is based around a strong man who fetishizes, at least nominally fetishizes, order that collapses around him because he has surrounded himself with underlings that are selected more for loyalty than ability. And he himself is wildly unstable and just completely spins out of control at the slightest provocation. There is no way in which I like that hasn't happened to us here in the past 2 years. But it's funny to see.
Yeah,
that.
I cannot think of a modern parallel. No, you're right.
No. Yeah, so this is definitely a real whole cloth work of fiction.
Sure is great that there's no parallels we can draw between our reality and this book.
Nothing to worry about, guys.
Maybe we can finish this and then we can do the dead zone, right? Just clear everything up.
Oh, geez, it's dark. Yeah. Wait, has Trump killed the dog? Yeah.
I mean, at this point, it's a matter of time, right?
I didn't mean to take it there. Like, I mean, obviously I did, but just listening.
I just said that, and now I really hope I'm wrong.
Yeah. So you have a note here, Evan, about how like these feel like separate characters to you, the walking dude versus the man in black.
They always have, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that what it really comes down to is that Randall Flagg in The Stand seems human. Like he seems like a person, like an actual. That's the best way I can think to describe it. And the way that I've always kind of thought about it is, he probably was at one point a human, and The Stand in my mind is closer to when he stopped being one than the Dark Tower is.
Right.
The scene that really keeps kind of sticking out to me is I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but there's a scene at the very end of the book right before Flagg makes his exit, and he's terrified of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the man in black would not be terrified of anything except for the Crimson King and maybe Roland sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything that happens in this book feels like it's huge to humanity, but it feels like it would all be kind of like small potatoes passing his time to somebody like the man in black that we know from the Dark Tower.
Right. Yeah, that is a good point. Like, small potatoes just kind of occupying your time. There's no sense of where this actually takes place, if there is kind of like any kind of continuity or ontology to this, single figure. Like, does this take place before, before when we see him in the tower? Does this take place before the Eyes of the Dragon? Like, did he fuck up Earth by being a political dissident before going over, to Delane and starting that up? I like, if that is the case, all you can read is that he is incredibly busy, going around and messing everything up. There's a little bit of a clue because he, I believe in Wizard and Glass, takes credit for the release of the superflu. So I'm like, yeah, I just every once in a while I go into one of these levels of the tower and set that up just to have some fun. I thought, like is kind of how it's implied. But yeah, like it's hard to have like a notion of growth of his character across these continuities.
Yeah. And so I think that I've just always kind of filled in the gaps in my own mind.
Yeah. Headcanon.
Yeah.
I felt pretty comfortable rearranging some of the facts around it in my head. When you look at, say, when we read The Eyes of the Dragon,
mm-hmm.
that character Flagg had been there for hundreds of years, kind of changing his persona. Yeah. And I think you could probably argue that since we see some just waking up, just getting into my car type of scenes with the Flagg in this,
mm-hmm.
that he's just starting those cycles.
Yeah.
So maybe we're just not we've got groggy Flagg and we had full on Flagg when he was with Roland in the desert or Walter,
Right. Yeah. And The Eyes of the Dragon, he was mixing up dragon sand and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, this our flag just hasn't had his morning coffee yet. He doesn't even know who he is yet till he has his coffee.
No, and he's definitely, he definitely is in the process of waking up in this. Like, I'm comfortable with both of these characters being the same because they are both outsiders. Not like in the like, oh, you're not from around here, are you? But like literally on the outside looking in, and that I that's not original. Stephen King has talked about that, and you used it to to describe him. This version of that character is still a sorcerer. He is still somebody who knows how to manipulate all kinds of power, and get what he wants by setting the world into chaos. Right.
Yeah.
That to me is kind of the through line between all of those, how he reacts to any particular one. Like, yeah, it's, there are moments later on in the Dark Tower series where he is a couple of steps behind, which is strange for him. But that lines up also with what we see with Flag here in this.
Yeah. I don't have any issue with the idea of them being the same character. I've just kind of like, they've always seemed like we're seeing the same character, but at different points in his evolution.
Yeah. And also, different points in what King had decided he wants this character to be. Like, there is a version of this character in the fable in The Wind Through the Keyhole, which I think is one of the best versions of this. And he wrote that 30 years after.
Yeah, and I still haven't read that yet. I've been saving it for the cast.
Oh, damn, that's so good.
I am really excited about it. I've been deliberately putting it off so that I can be first read excited when we do that episode.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's somebody on this cast who has more Dark Tower to read. I'm jealous.
Yeah, that is something that has been very much by design.
Yeah. So there are a couple of other reasons why this is in a series about the Dark Tower. At the beginning of Wizard and Glass, in a couple of weeks here, the Katet is going to visit this world. They're going to pass through Athene, one of these holes in reality, and come to what they find out is a different level of the tower, an alternate history where the plague has, released. They're going to see notes. They're going to see notes about Captain Trips. They're going to be in Kansas and see kind of the desolation. And they're also going to see some references, to the Crimson King, who doesn't pop up here aside from just regular Lord of the Rings kind of imagery related to a large red eye.
And there's the black stones with the red flaw.
Yes.
Has always seemed to me like a Crimson King thing.
Yeah, it's like a calling card.
Yeah, that's a better word than thing.
Yeah.
if you're gonna be a all powerful force for evil, you got to get your merch right.
Yeah, you got to get your branding on point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are other kind of ideas that are present here, like the way that magic manifests, and also kind of this idea of highways and hiding, which I think is just a phrase that Stephen King really likes, but actually turns into a thing later on in the Dark Tower series. And those are just kind of these dark nether passageways across America that Randall Flagg wanders, to get from place to place. We should really get into the details of the story itself, and we're going to follow the story and the progression of the flu, kind of the backbone of this, by talking about the both the people who developed the flu and a character named Stu Redmond, who is introduced in a pretty fun way. But we got to start with the actual releasing of the virus, and this is introduced in the expanded version. Like, it's not actually present. You don't get to see what actually happens with this. But the novel opens up with this guard, Charles Campion, escaping from this military facility, like waking his wife and daughter up, saying, "We need to get out of here as quickly as possible," because the door the door should have locked, but it didn't.
We talked at the beginning how this was about how this is the eternal struggle between good and evil and the characters on the front. I guess they could have had those two dudes with swords. One of them could have just been a faulty lock mechanism. That's the whole problem is our government underinvested in locking mechanisms for gates. That's again the cause of 99.6% of the world died because somebody tried to cheap it out on a lock.
Yep, because of some no bid contract that some fat cat awarded to his crony.
Those damn
Exactly.
fat cats.
Yeah.
He was in the pocket of Big Lock.
Oh, damn you. You're not the master of locks. Not the master of locks at all. This is terrifying because, like, he doesn't exactly, it is only referred to in some like oblique kind of fashions. She says, "Oh, damn, has it happened?" I was worried about this. How she knows what they were working on there, I have no idea. Loose lip sink ships campion. But yeah, like when he's deciding, like, if they have time to pack their clothes, like he licks his finger and tests the wind to see if it's headed their way, not understanding that he and most of the rest of the world is already dead.
The Campion escape scene is great. I do want to put a note in for podcast listeners. If you're a 10-year-old girl listening to this podcast, you're probably not liking this part of the book. It's a little stressful for you, but just power through. You're going to love it.
Just power through. You're going to stop in 50 pages. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, it's a lot, but they get out. Like he is the one person who escaped. And he gets from California, like Southern California, all the way to East Texas. And this is kind of described as, the inciting incident, like, oh, this is where they found him. It's where he landed. This is where the plague started from. He was infecting people all along the way. Like, by the time his car rolls up to the gas station in Arnett, Texas, they're dying. His daughter and wife are already dead. He is delirious. He has all these symptoms. His respiratory system is mostly phlegm at that point. And it's kind of described. We have Stu, who says, "Oh, if only I didn't turn off the pumps, none of this would have happened." No, the horse is already out the barn.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Stu. Stu's kind of the Aragorn of the story. If we're taking the Lord of the Rings kind of tack for this, kind of a good old boy. Not really doing an awful lot. I think he works he's on furlough from a calculator factory in Arnett, Texas. I think Arnett's a fictional town, but he spends his days just kind of drinking and putting up with his friends down at the gas station.
I would just like to take a moment to appreciate the description of Aragorn as a good old boy.
Well, king of whatever, the ranger.
Yeah, I had never thought of that before, but it's spot on.
Yeah. Well, I just mean, like, Stu is the closest thing that we have.
He's
to
honorable.
Right. Yeah, he's got his head on straight. Like, he's a real practical, kind of straight shooter kind of person. There's very little in the way of, like, moral failing to him. And what we see is, him trying to wrestle with, like, the new responsibility that is put on him. Not so much as other characters like Larry, but still, he is a central figure in this.
And also, he carries that sweet sword named Andoril, right?
Yep, beheading people. Am I off base with the Aragorn comparison?
No, I don't think so.
Oh no,
at all.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of those comparisons. I definitely know who Frodo is, and I definitely know who Smeagol is. But
please tell us who Frodo is.
Oh, Tom.
Yeah.
Tom.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I don't know if I would have come up with that, but now that you say it, I feel pretty slow for not coming up with it.
Yeah. And Gollum.
M-O-O-N, that spells Hobbit.
Yep. And Gollum / Smeagol is trashy. Trash can man.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that's an original thought.
Looks like
Maybe
we got ourselves a fellowship going.
I think we do. So what do you guys think of Stu? And kind of his initial characterization and kind of the way he deals with some of these early struggles, because like right away he is whisked off to different plague centers and stuff, and he is not cooperating with anybody really.
I can't really blame him.
No. He senses a cover up. He knows he knows that something is wrong.
I was going to say that, of course, we like Stu. We respect Stu. Stu's always a little bit of like a cipher for me. Like I can't always tell. It's hard for me to empathize sometimes with the character. I like him so much. I love how practical he is, how crafty he is, the way that he works the staff at the CDC facility. I mean, he's so smart. He's so cool. But I have a difficult time kind of relating to him the way I'm able to with some of the other characters, maybe Fran or Harold or Larry, some of those characters. Yeah. He's an enigma for me.
Yeah, he's an enigma because of how straightforward he is.
Exactly.
And then I'm not being smart there, but like, yeah, he's kind of he was the football star in high school. You know, he turned down a scholarship so he could take care of his brother, you know, after his parents died. Like, just a bunch of stuff like that. Like, he has all of these earmarks of like a true American hero, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I alluded to, you know, the plague starts spreading in Arnett, and he's, you know, everybody is kind of quarantined here, you know, like eventually blockades start popping up. And you know, eventually Stu is whisked away. We learned a little bit more by some of these cutaways to the Project Blue kind of, you know, center itself, you know, back where Campion escaped from. We have a character who I cannot not see as oh my gosh, I can't unsee him as, what is that character's name? Ed Harris is who plays him in the in the miniseries. Starkey, kind of the commander who's in charge of that. Yes. Like, you know, popping downers, you know, he's taking blues and he is watching all of these corpses, you know, down in the labs rot on these security cameras as people give him these status reports, right?
That's really what shines in this book, are the little moments like that where he's thinking about the guy with his face in the bowl of soup, or when he's thinking about his daughter and his worthless son-in-law, things like that. The characterization in this, I mean, some of the plot points, I mean, really you're using dreams as the driving like force in the story. I mean, that's kind of a cop-out when it comes to plotting. But the characterizations are so crystal clear. I mean, every character feels so real.
Mm-hmm. It just,
no matter if they're maybe a 2-page character, you know?
You know, down to him, you know, before he ultimately kills himself, like, you know, reciting Yeats from memory because I think it was his sister said, if you're going to go into the army, you're going to have to read The Second Coming by Yeats. You know, that is the one that, like, oh, you know, the center cannot hold, nothing gold can say it's a different thing. Fuck. But like his deterioration as he doesn't sleep, but he continues popping tranquilizers is a real thing. And also, like, a lot of the stuff in Starkey's story, and a good deal of the book in general, is relayed like almost like epistolary, in terms of, you know, it is pulled from documents, it's pulled from diaries, it's pulled from in this case like reports or computer readouts about the status of the plague in the center itself, and kind of these, you know, event readouts that come in. In Starkey, you just get the sense that like they are under quarantine. Like, he is like there's nothing that he can do besides watch the world fall down around him, as, you know, at this point, as one of the few people who actually knows what's going on.
The good news about all of this is we're pulling funding from the CDC, so this story has actually never been less likely to happen than it is right now. I mean, we probably were working on a superflu bug in the late 90s, but now we've kind of reined some of that funding back. We're going for booms, not sniffles, and I think we might be safe from at least a genetically engineered superflu. A regular mutation, just random, maybe, but I think we're looking pretty good.
Yeah, Project Blue is being sunset, but Project Purell is still happening. Yeah. And that's worth kind of dwelling on, because like the thing that ends up killing most of the population is a government project. You know, it is Project Red, White, and Blue. Boy, that was cheesy. I don't know. And that's one of the things that makes this a little bit of a stretch. Like, it is a good story about, you know, it is a good story for paranoia, but it defies it defies suspension of disbelief to think that there would be either this massive conspiracy or massive cover-up, and to have everybody working on, like kind of off of the same page to keep this from getting like completely out of control, even though it ultimately does.
The one thing that is very plausible, though, is that once it got too far out of control, that we would totally send people to China and Russia and South America to break their vials and transmit it everywhere, so nobody would know it was us.
Mutually assured destruction,
Exactly.
Yeah. By the time anybody figures out, we're all dead as fuck, because like over the course of 19 days, there you go. Like, just, it's done. It's gone. Not only do we send people over to do the mutually assured destruction thing, but like we get one of these chapters that I know is added in the expanded edition, but adds so much. The and so on chapter describing that salesman getting out of our net and then just describing the transmission and like racking up. You can picture like in the TV version of this or the update, just kind of like number of people infected being displayed in the bottom corner. As like, oh, he stopped at a diner and infected 13 people. Who then got on a plane and spread it to this city, this city, and this city. Like, one single chapter is a germaphobe's nightmare.
Oh, yeah. The line that's always stuck with me is the one where the girl is worried that her boyfriend's given her the clap, but it turns out he's given her something much worse.
Yep. It is a very good line.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is like it is just one of these little intermissions that tells you exactly how bad everything is. Not for everybody though, because in first Atlanta and then they move them to Stovington after the people start dying in Stovington, Vermont. They establish that hey, Stu is immune. There is a reason why he has no symptoms. I believe he's like the way this works is they're carriers, but they are not symptomatic. And they determine that like this works by rapidly mutating, so that the immune system cannot actually get a hold of it, but the people who are kind of chosen to survive are able to adapt to it. And so yeah, like we have this first inkling of this very small group of people. It's like 0.6% of the population that will outlive this, right? Meanwhile, we get these we get more of these scenes of the government quarantining these cities. Stu is watching the news and kind of like noticing that nobody is covering the flu, or if they are, they're talking about it like there are vaccines coming. He gets the suspicion watching the staff, how like eventually there are no more doctors coming in for him. It's all like military type people. He's noticing the newscasters on the on the TV, like casting glances off as they are being handed new copy to read. In this very like, again, paranoia inducing sequence.
The use of the news media scenes throughout this section of the book are just fantastic. I mean, there is a slow creeping dread that you start to feel as footage is being pulled out, and just seeing how a media takeover or blackout kind of happens at the government's direction and implementation, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To the point where the media starts rebelling. You have the radio DJ who decides to actually tell the truth, saying like, hey, the free press has been co-opted by the government. All the stuff we have been reading to you has been has been a lie, and that because you've seen the streets, what's going on. And that person is killed on the air for that happening. And kind of heartbreakingly, like another call is accepted saying like, hey, I'm super happy you're doing what you're doing. Like, continue fighting the fight.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah. And this is also about the time that, like once it starts getting out there that Starkey, our good friend, our Yeats quoting person, decides to venture into the Project Blue facility because he has had enough of watching this person who died face down in their Campbell's chunky sirloin soup in the mess hall.
That detail has always just... Yeah, I don't know what it is, but that's one of the scenes that has always like given me the heebie-jeebies.
Well, the consistency of the chunky sirloin, I don't know that I've had that particular one, but any kind of chunky soup like that, they describe it like congealing in his eyebrows, and we have to assume it's been several days, so the smell has to be unimaginable.
Just that like unnecessary level of banal specificity. Yeah.
I just love how outraged Starkey is. Like that is no way for a man to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talk about the soup. For me, it's that line where that dying guy in the center where Stu says, "Come down and eat chicken with me, beautiful." It's so dark. That's the line that sticks with me. I don't ever want someone that's dying to grab at me and say, "Come eat chicken with me, beautiful." That's freaky.
I think that's a reasonable thing to want or not want.
Yeah, don't feel bad asking for that. You're not putting out too many people.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm just trying to walk down the street and somebody's accosting me trying to eat fried chicken with me while they're dying.
Yeah, it's no big deal. Come on.
Just trying to live my life.
So, Autumn, who is it that says that? Like, is that what Elder says when he comes to kill Stu?
Once Stu gets out and he's Elder comes to kill him, and once Stu is kind of running through the facility, I can't remember if this is on the way before he runs into Elder or if this is right after Elder when he's just trying to get out of the building.
Okay. Yeah. Because everybody
is his escape.
Right. Everybody is delirious with the flu, including the person who is, sent to kill him. This is terrifying to me, actually. Like, a lot of Stu's story up to this point has actually been pretty scary from like a practical standpoint. Like, oh, you can just be whisked away and disappeared and held in this government facility and not be told what's going on. Like, that is, it's maybe a little bit outlandish, but like it's rooted in a form of reality. When you get to the point where this is just like a dead facility, you are underground and there is a person whose face you cannot see, and all you can tell is that they are here with a gun and you are disposable. That standoff, and then ultimately him running through this maze trying to find his way out as this person who refuses to die is shouting deliriously at you and firing, is ridiculously grim.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say yeah.
Like that is one of the things that is stuck with me, the most about this is Stu's kind of nightmarish escape, and the fact that he is marked by this. He carries this with him for a long time.
I think Stu and then Lloyd in the prison are probably the two characters that we see that have had it the worst when it comes to their plague origin story.
Yeah, they're like their hardships. If you assume that everybody who has a parent lost their parent, like that eventually becomes like, oh, what's so special? Larry, I know you ain't no nice guy. You didn't go through an awful lot to get where you got to. Stu's had it real rough.
Yeah.
But eventually he gets out, and he vows never to come back, even though Harold, that little shit, brings him back because he doesn't believe Stu. And he has to find his way. So he wanders. Like a lot of these characters have this period where they are wandering across the countryside, walking along the streets, seeing just the traffic jams and the dead cars, and noticing all the, horrifying scenes of people dying, where they're like out of their mind with loneliness. And this is another one of the ways that King really lines everything up and takes a bunch of stuff into account, and, in painting this picture of like what happens if just everybody dies. Like, this is a very good end of the world story, and those are a dime a dozen. Like, dystopias are like kind of everywhere. This feels realistic in a way, and kind of horrifying for, after the shell shock, everybody just kind of becomes numb to it.
The early section of this book and the way that you are kind of introduced feels like too strong a word. The way that you're kind of tossed into this world in the Dark Tower, is I have always just been taken by, like, if you've read The Stand and then you get to that part, like, it is so much more affecting after having read The Stand than it was the first time I read through. Is it Wastelands that they find that, or is it later?
Oh, it's Wisdom and Glass. That's why we're covering up coming up.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I read this after, and so it's like, oh, okay, yeah, Captain Trips. All right.
now we know what happened.
Now I get it.
Yeah. Now you know the rest of the story. Yeah.
It's very bad.
Yeah. Autumn, do you have anything to say about kind of the wasteland aspect of this?
Not as much. I think it's more interesting. Again, I love the order that you're doing this in, because it's so much more impactful reading it in the upcoming book after you've actually seen what's going on. Like, seeing it referenced in the upcoming books it makes it a lot more fun and a lot more satisfying.
Yeah. And you kind of have to see it. You have to know what this book is before you go into it. And like, in that way, that part of Wizard and Glass is kind of hostile to people who haven't like read everything. And it's the first kind of move that he has made to link the Dark Tower to a bunch of other stuff, to start using that series as a nexus for all of his work. Yeah.
It actually makes it a lot more stressful for me when you read about it in the Dark Tower, because I'm like, should these guys be wearing masks like they're on a subway and or something, and over in Asia? Like,
yeah.
I don't need Jake to start coughing.
No, that'd suck. Oh no, we passed by the wrong window to the wrong reality, and now we're done for.
Yeah. Keflex isn't going to save us now.
Nope. Didn't save them. That might be some good interdimensional GAN blessed Keflex that that does the job. We're introduced as Stu is wandering across Vermont to one of my favorite characters in the book. Not only because he is an author insert who is just kind of like who flies off the handle about kind of the philosophy about what's going on. But just because I like his personality a lot. Glenn Pequod Bateman, the retired sociologist who is a terrible painter, but because everybody is dead, he's probably one of the better painters in the world.
That's a good point.
And his good dog. And his good dog.
Yeah, such a good boy, Kojak.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts about Kojak is his name used to be Big Jim, which is a fact that we have no reason to know.
Nope, but it's a good fact.
It is.
This book is so long that Stephen King even put a point of view chapter in for a dog.
That is a good chapter.
That's one of my very favorite chapters.
Yeah, his cross country journey. His they didn't make it, but it formed the basis for what am I saying? What's the movie with the two dogs and the cat who go across? Yeah, it's a third Homeward Bound movie after they got lost in the city in part 2. Fuck me. Why? Don't start the joke if you don't know the thing. I was really hoping I would have more runway for that one, guys.
Man, I forgot that there was a second Homeward Bound movie.
Yeah. I remember seeing it as a kid in the theater, and I assure you it wasn't very good.
It really, really wasn't. I know that I saw it at some point, but
yeah. But Glenn Bateman, Stu becomes fast friends with him, and one of my favorite things about him is, he's very upfront, with the idea that I wasn't, I was a professional, I was an academic, but I didn't really thrive in the old world. He talks about how he would open up a savings account and, close it the next day. He end up eating peanut butter sandwiches because he used up all of his money before his next paycheck. He didn't have his life together. And he, is taking a lot of this change in stride because he sees it as an opportunity to actually see what happens to people at nascent societies after such a catastrophe. It's not amoral, he's not oh yes, all of this death is worth it, but he seems relatively unflapped and kind of like really game to move on and really happy about, you know, having somebody to talk to because he really loves to talk.
And his stuff is so quotable and fun. You know, give me one man and I'll do this. Give me two and I'll do this. 3, they'll form a society. I mean, he's just a fun character.
5, they'll form religion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good stuff. And I'm very happy that he wasn't just a one-off. Like eventually, you know, Stu, after he meets up with the others, ends up going back to get them, to get him and Kojak to kind of come along. And Glenn Bateman is like, you know, this support character throughout the rest of the book, and you know, provides an awful lot of kind of like insight or some of the broader, you know, symbolism. Not in a very elegant way, I have to say, but I like his character all the same in spite of that. What do you think of Glenn, Evan?
I've always liked Glenn. Like it. I have a hard time imagining anybody not liking Glenn. And I don't know. I'm not really sure how much to say without there's so much of the character stuff that's hard to talk about in it just talking about the first part of this book, because the really interesting part about these characters is they're in the entirety of their development, mm-hmm. and or lack thereof, yeah. I guess.
But you can talk about this because they're, you know, this is about when they are having the dreams, right? And
right.
Even, go ahead.
I love Glenn's character so much, and the way that his story ends has always just made me so sad every single time.
Yeah. That's what I was going to lead to, because, you know, people who are listening to this should probably understand, you know, we're going to have to talk about some of this for, you know, for context, as kind of this consummate, you know, academic, you know, agnostic or what have you, like, oh, I'm interested in this. Like, he is skeptical of the idea of like larger forces being brought in. His undoing and how he actually also helps things along, like his role is in actually confronting and facing Flag and summing him up to actually not be as you know, terrifying as everything else had you know, led him to believe, right? Actually looking in the face and saying, oh, you know, actually, like, I have no idea why we were so scared of you in the first place. And he pays dearly for that.
Yeah.
But that is, you know, at least 1,000 pages from now. There's a chapter here. This is another one of the chapters that was added for the expanded edition, but I cite it along with like the Patrick Hofstadter chapter in It, and one particular chapter in book 7 that is one of these great chapters in horror. I refer to it as the No Great Loss chapter. Do you know specifically which one I'm talking about?
Oh, absolutely. This is some of probably my favorite writing out of any work of popular fiction that I've read.
I love it because go ahead. Complete your thought.
I was just going to say that it's strange and it's predictable and it's fascinating. A story might be a paragraph. A story might be 3 pages. And I got to tell you, old Autumn Greer probably would have died on the first page of that section. Like, Autumn didn't know about botulism. Whoops. Now she's dead. No great loss, you know?
Wait a minute. This can is bloated. There's the 25% extra. Yay.
Exactly. In particular for me, I think one that stands out is the girl that kept her dead family in the refrigerator, and that line, you know, she's going down there to keep checking on them. You're seeing her internal monologue about it, but that line about it was not cold enough to freeze, but it was anyway, freezing versus starving in that refrigerator after she got herself trapped in there was just it was just a fascinating, dark little twist story. Yeah. You know?
Well, what we're referring to is a chapter in the middle of the book, which you will know if you've read it, where King describes kind of the second plague, or the second epidemic, which is people who survived Captain Trips, but are not equipped to actually deal with life after society has fallen. So the smallest accidents, the slightest mishap that could be made worse or fatal by the fact that nobody is around to help you, becomes deadly, right? So you have people, you have a junkie who follows some leads from his old dealers to go to this massive stash and, shoots up, but doesn't realize that, this dealer had been cutting everything. He'd never actually taken anything that pure. So he died. You have people who are dealing with, their abusive spouses and things like that. You have people, sometimes just like one sentence, like, oh, he fell off of a ladder and died, no great loss. Like, yeah, it's so prosaic to the point where like, I will sometimes just say no great loss in the same way that I might say, oh, so it goes, like from Slaughterhouse-Five. Like, it is so good.
Yeah.
Evan, does it stick with you?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of those sections in Stephen King's catalog that, similar to The Fall of Lud, I'll sometimes just like have random flashes to it for no explicable reason, and it's just so weird and so unsettling on such a very core base level.
Yeah.
And it's much more personal and intimate than The Fall of Lud, and I think that makes it a lot. I'm going to go with spookier.
Yeah, like it's everyday stuff. Like,
yeah.
I live alone, and I like that fact. It's pretty sweet. I generally don't have the like Liz Lemon fear of choking and nobody being around to help me kind of deal.
That's a healthy fear not to have.
Right. But there's some of that, like where I'm up on a stool changing changing a light bulb, where it's like, yeah, if situations were just a little bit different, I could fall and break my neck. I could totally $1 million baby myself, and I would not have a way out of this.
Yeah,
it's pretty spooky.
I'm not talking right now because I'm Googling life alert bracelet because I'm getting stressed.
Weirdly, I've got so many Amazon Echoes that I could probably find a way to make it do a 911 call just by my voice.
Call the police. Call an ambulance.
Oh boy, I'm definitely gonna have to cut that out. I will keep the gag, but I will cut out the name. Man, the modern day is really, really weird.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's right. I did say that, like somebody that doesn't have.
God damn it, Autumn.
Alexa.
As someone else who doesn't have one, is it that you don't want to say it because it will trigger the device, or is it like a copyright intellectual property thing?
No, it'll trigger the device. Like if you're listening to it in the same room. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're in a real Xbox off situation.
A little bit, yeah. And I'm going to have to ask you not to abuse that because it just gives me more editing to do. to duck
okay, sure. Sorry about
that. No, it's perfectly fine. It is a fun joke, but it also doesn't make work. We can have both. So Stu, on the road eventually meets this other party who we're going to talk about next here. This girl named Fran, a 20-year-old girl, and this boy named Harold. She seems perfectly nice and perfectly practical. Harold is kind of a piece of shit. He is. Well, we'll talk about Harold when we get there. But Harold doesn't want to join up with Stu because he is very jealous, of guarding Fran. And there's this moment where Stu, pulls Harold aside and says, like, "Hey, listen, you don't have to worry about this. Don't be so paranoid. I'm not going to horn in on your action." And then immediately he does. Yeah. So we should talk about Fran and Harold and get a little bit more of the of the background on these folks, because that is important, because even though I call Harold a piece of shit, He's also the character that I have the most kind of like sympathy for. Not the most sympathy. He's not a sympathetic character. I am intrigued by Harold as a fictional person. Is that a politic way to say it?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Like he is not a character that I like.
No. I also don't like him because he reminds me of me.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to say, but
I really didn't like this character when I was reading this book and I was a teenager.
You guys need to be a little bit nicer to my friend Harold, okay? You try growing up with a sister like that who's so perfect Amy,
yeah,
right?
You know, just the model runway of her life, everything given to her, you know.
My dad saying all this stuff to me, like completely emasculating me. It's humiliating. I don't have friends at school.
I'm an outcast. I have to hide my insecurity behind, a guise of pseudo-intellectualism, of precociousness.
I'm only 16 and Franny's a cutie.
We're the only two left. And, she said, not if I was the last person on the world. And guess what? Every dog gets his day. So we're kind of rewinding back toward the beginning of the book because we're in pre-plague times. Fran, we find out in her introduction, she is introduced by confronting her boyfriend or, somebody she's seeing at the time, saying like, hey, guess what, Jesse? I'm glad you came up here from Portland. We're in Ogunquit, Maine. I'm glad you came up here because I'm pregnant. She is, she opens this kind of dealing with, an unwanted pregnancy. And this kind of follows her throughout the rest of the book and becomes kind of a climactic moment later on. And her dad is, really kind of forgiving, but her mom is, outraged. There's this amazing chapter that was added in the extended edition about, the den, kind of representing her mom's, distance from her and, also like how prim and proper everything is and showing that, Fran's mother is more interested in the appearances, doesn't really care about her daughter's well-being as much as she cares about kind of the legacy of the family and stuff like that. So Fran, even before the superflu is kind of dealing with this dramatic situation that is kind of wiped off the slate. Well, aside from the baby thing, by the events of the book. What do you guys think of giggly Fran?
I will say that Fran is one of the more lovingly rendered Stephen King characters. Sometimes we don't get as much internal monologue with Susanna in the Dark Tower series. Mm-hmm. She's kind of defined more by her plot, but the characterization is with Fran. I can't think of a single female Stephen King character that stands out. I mean, even in Dolores Claiborne, I know less about. I mean, that's more of a character than a person. Fran feels very, very real.
Yeah. When I say she's giggly, like that isn't to imply that she's a ditz, although the Molly Ringwald characterization of this is a little bit more flighty than I would like. Like I'm happy you hit on the inner monologue kind of side of this because she, we get a sense of the way she thinks and the way she kind of assembles these things, especially when she, finds her dad dead. And we just kind of get her at her most mentally distraught, like getting lost in these little rhymes, that she is, thinking about these little parables and stuff. Like, her thought process is kind of laid bare and it humanizes her in a way, that you sometimes don't get when you just see somebody's actions. Right.
Oh, I was just going to say, you had mentioned the scene with her father, which is one of the most evocative. I can't imagine doing what she did with a member of my family. You know?
Yeah. Just like she knows that her dad will rot up there, on the second floor. And, she puts together like, oh, it's a shame he had to die on such a beautiful, warm, June or July day. And she ends up having to like sew a shroud around him and carry him down to the garden and bury him there. Like it is a very, it's a heart-wrenching thing.
Yeah.
Evan.
I've honestly never really had super strong thoughts or feelings about Fran. Like she's fine. Like she's an interesting character. For some reason, for me, she always kind of gets lost in the shuffle with everything else going on.
I think that relates to something unfortunate that happens where after Harold is introduced, and especially after they leave Ogunquit, she's sidelined, and she kind of becomes, she gets these point of view chapters, especially because, a lot of the exposition comes from her diary, where we get her as an observer and she is writing to her unborn child. She eventually kind of just becomes an object to define Harold and his turn more than a lot of other, more than other aspects of her character, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, that probably is most, if not all, of what's behind it.
Yeah. So we're introduced to Harold. He swings by. He's one of the only other people who has survived in the town. He is driving around in this stolen Cadillac. What does he care? He's not alive anymore. The person that I took this from is kind of going around and looting all the candy. Harold is overweight. He's got acne. He's always eating candy bars and stuff like that. He is incredibly pretentious, and, I mean that in a very literal sense. Like, he is compensating for his own, perceived lack of self-worth because of his social and family situation by being this, by affecting this struggling artist, deep author kind of persona, and trying very hard to dominate everybody else by, just always having the smart ass comment. It's worth noting that King has based this character somewhat on himself when he was in high school. So this does come from a point of sympathy. And he has the opportunity to grow. He has every opportunity to not be like this, but he doesn't take it because of his kind of lifelong obsession with Fran, who was, his sister's best friend.
I think that we really see with Harold, and we haven't talked about Larry yet. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but you see, I think that there's a parallel. Like, Harold's someone that thinks that he deserves success, but hasn't realized it. Larry's got that hit song, and he doesn't seem to kind of give a shit about it. Aside from what it can kind of get him. It's interesting to see how two people by this same event, one grows and turns from a total piece of shit into a pretty stand-up guy. Mm-hmm. And the other one, I mean, they're presented with the same opportunities. It really just highlights the journey that both of those characters make, having them next to each other as a foil for each other.
Yeah. Harold's relationship with Larry is really funny, because, Harold does have good ideas. And one of the things that he does is to leave these, leave these signs, telling about their movements and, telling anybody who finds them, hey, here's where you can come get us. And Larry is following in the footsteps, not understanding exactly who Harold is, and his description of Harold, based on this evidence, is so the exact opposite. when he's finally going to meet him, like, the picture that we get of what Larry expects Harold to be is one of the more comic moments in the book.
Absolutely. There's a parallel for them as well when they're both tempted by Nadine later in the book too. I mean, they're both the two characters that are on the other side of her when they're in Colorado.
Oh yeah, you're right. And I was so obsessed with this part of the book that I forgot about that. Yeah, they are kind of set up against each other, aren't they? So after the Cadillac encounter, Fran finds Harold shirtless and just kind of like in a daze, like mowing his lawn crazily. Like, she's worried he's going to have a heart attack, because he is doing this, almost, in a trance. And, she comforts him, and that's when they decide that they're gonna, they're gonna go. And they eventually, end up meeting up with Stu. That's where we get the, Harold being very jealous of Fran, and also Harold not believing Stu when he says, yeah, Stovington is dead. Like, they're on their way to Stovington because they believe that, oh, they're researching a cure there. Maybe we can help, and in spite of that, they drag Stu back to the site of his nightmare, which is, some emotional violence that Harold does, which is not great.
I have to tell you, Stu is a lot. I mean, he just doesn't have an ounce of passive aggressiveness in his body, does he?
No.
I would spend the whole trip to Vermont being like, everybody's going to be dead when we get there. I don't know why y'all don't believe me. I mean, I don't know what this says about me, but it would be a misery driving with me on like mopeds to the place that I escaped from where everyone is dead. I mean, I wouldn't shut up about it.
Yeah, like I wouldn't go along for the ride. Like this is where we would part ways.
I mean, I'd sit in the parking lot. Everyone would come out throwing up. I'd be like, oh yeah, you believe old Autumn now? Yeah.
Yep. Uh-huh. Yeah. A lot of bodies in there, huh? Not an awful lot of cures. Yeah. I didn't go on the third floor. Maybe the cure's up there.
Yeah, exactly. You find any cures in there, little buddy?
Why did this character turn into Stewie? Oh, Jesus. One thing I forgot to make a note of is this is where the dreams start for them as well. Starting specifically, I believe the first dream we get of the Dark Man is Fran dreaming of this, shadowy figure coming after her with a coat hanger, and that is something that's going to hold true for a lot of these other characters, which is their worst. The Dark Man is going to manifest as kind of their worst fears. So like, Stu will dream of Stovington and have this shadowy figure of Elder chasing him through this endless maze, et cetera, and down the line. Notably, I think that neither Harold nor Nadine end up having the dreams, which is strange, or at least they don't cop to them. Yeah, that's right. They don't cop to them. But like that is a common aspect of everybody who is spared, is that they are all vivid dreamers. Let's talk about the bad guys. Let's take this intermission because I love the bad guys and I wish that we had more time with them.
Lloyd is another character that really finds himself after all of this.
He does, and it's halfway through, magical intervention on Flag's part just by being around him, but also, just like a change in circumstance. In Lloyd Henreid and the Trash Can Man, we have two characters who never got any. I was trying to avoid saying never got any respect, so I apologize for that. But just never had anybody want to have them around. We're always looked down upon for their condition. Lloyd being, kind of a dumb guy, petty criminal, just kind of like a thug almost, right? And Trash Can Man being somebody who is legitimately mentally ill, who was institutionalized for pyromania, who had kind of been run through the ringer of these, of these treatments, leaving him, kind of just like tortured with these hallucinations of the kids he grew up with, taunting him for being somebody who lit trash cans and mailboxes on fire and wet his pants while he did so.
Man, it sounds like he grew up in Derry, Maine, huh?
A little bit, yeah.
He's got those bullies.
Yeah, but I think I don't think he grew up in Gary.
I think he's maybe Indiana, because he was in Terre Haute, or I don't actually know how to pronounce that.
Yeah, he got sent up to Terre Haute for the for their institution, right? Trash Can Man only gets one chapter here, but he ends up being kind of the person that Flag brings in to help him like sniff out artillery, to like go out into the desert to these military kind of facilities to get to get weaponry because of Trash Can Man's kind of obsession with explosives and things like that. He specifically says like, I'm going to set you to burn. And we're introduced to Trash like as he is his name is Donald Merwin Elwin or something like that. But he takes on the persona of Trash Can Man, and I will call him Trashy because that is a fun thing to call a person, I guess. We're introduced to him as he is like going up to these gigantic oil tanks in Gary, Indiana, and lighting them on fire. Like, and eventually, like this is presented in fragments, but like as the characters end up moving west, they go past whole towns that are completely burned up because all the oil tanks have, been destroyed. And this is Trash Can Man's work. Like he is, like that's what he does in a world without any real authority, is he indulges in this obsession.
I've always thought that it was kind of the how is a raven like a writing desk of this book. We never find out what old lady Semple said when Trash torched her pension check.
Yeah.
What did she say?
It's asked so many times, like, wait, why did you do that? Evan, what do you think of Trashy?
This is maybe one of my favorite characters in that we're going to talk about on this podcast, just because he's so strange and relatable in very uncomfortable ways.
Just because of the childhood taunting, like there, but for the grace of God, go I. Like, can you elaborate on that?
Sort of. It's kind of. I can't personally relate to Trash, but I guess that there's just something like his impulses seem very human and very realistic and very believable. And it's not so much a there but for the grace of God go I situation. It's more like, that's not me, but I get it.
Yeah. It's he doesn't seem evil to me.
No, there's
an earnestness.
Yeah. Like at first blush, he kind of reminds me of Gaffer, but I don't think is really anything like Gaffer, actually.
Oh, you mean Gasher?
Did I say Gaffer?
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that you weren't referring to another character.
No, definitely Gasher.
Yeah.
Like there's really not a lot of similarity there at all.
Aside from the appearance at the end.
Aside from the appearance and like the general weirdness.
Right. Yeah. Just like he legitimately needs to be cared for. Like he, had a bad break in the system, but like he is a danger to everybody around him, but not because of like any design that he has. It's because of this obsession, because of this, almost paraphilia toward flame and explosion. Right.
Yeah.
Trash Can Man is good. Like you can maybe take some shots at it for being Stephen King using the mentally disabled, in a supernatural way, which is just kind of what he does. It's a little bit part of the landscape you have to kind of accept when you're here.
Yeah.
But that is...
It's not... It could be worse.
Yeah. It could be Tom Cullen. Yeah. Oh, let's talk about Lloyd. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that when we talk about some of these characters, like some of the point of view stuff that he does with Mother Abigail later, I sometimes feel like Stephen King, who kind of came up in Maine that has probably a pretty homogenous in some ways ethnic population or what you're exposed to. I mean, I don't personally have a friend that I know in person that I hang out with all the time from West Virginia. So if I were going to write some West Virginia character, I'd be like, he wiped the coal dust off of his face and then went to a Bim Bam live show. Like, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like he is just like, okay. He doesn't think sometimes stereotypes are harmful. But I mean, again, you're kind of sometimes, if you had me describe a Finnish person, I'd be like, aren't they known for being stoic? Okay, I got a stoic Finnish guy in my novel. I want representation. I just don't know how to do it very well.
Yeah. He's going to be talking about the fjords a lot. Yeah. There's an amazing Onion article that it's one of their ask, an advice column kind of thing. The headline is "Ask an Old Black Woman as written by a college freshman." And
oh wow!
If you read it, it is almost exactly like what you get with Mother Abigail. Like, it's a lot of just kind of just like back in my day kind of stuff. Like, just a lot of descriptions about being soulful. It's like real. It is very well observed satire on the part of the Onion, and I I'm mostly of one mind about Mother Abigail. Like, I generally don't think that she's that interesting of a character in this. But that is just, again, something you don't have to accept it because like it is worth criticizing, but it's just something that he does. He being Stephen King, he will latch on to people of color or, people who have, let's say, differing mental circumstances and use that toward his, toward his plot, right? In some ways that don't seem especially forward looking. That said, doesn't happen an awful lot anymore in his books.
I guess when you're known for being somebody that can draw these beautiful portraits of characters, but you're known also as maybe being someone that it kind of falls apart sometimes in the plot dimension. I guess maybe that is why he's using so many of these characters to drive the plot. He's like, I'm not good at plot, so if I can just make the character be the plot.
Yeah. And, when he talks about the way he writes, and you can see that here, like he first gets a believable character and thinks real hard about what they would do in a situation, and that's how you get, somebody like Harold Lauder, knowing that there's a plague center nearby, because like, of course he would know that because he reads it, he reads about it. Right. And with characters like Trash Can Man who have their own kind of demented logic, to them, it achieves similar results, but it just seems unfortunate because of the particular quirks of the people he is basing this off of. Lloyd Henreid is one of my favorite characters in this book. We're introduced to him in this amazing way. Like, they're driving across the desert. Lloyd Henreid and his friend Poke. In the audiobook, Grover Gardner does this amazing voice for Poke. Like, he sounds like a character out of Squidbillies. We're gonna pokerize him, Lloyd. Like, it's real over the top. It's pretty great. But they're like these small time criminals who just have a whole bunch of drugs in the back seat of their car, who are driving across the desert after having killed a bunch of people because, well, we're criminals, so we might as well do it. Specifically Poke, who is the one, Lloyd insists that he only did small time stuff before he got in with Poke. Poke has this, magnum, and then he describes shooting people as pokerize them. Let's pokerize them. Yeah, it's real, kind of grim and kind of cartoonish. It's almost Juggalo behavior. Or I know Juggalos are political allies now, so that's fine. It is the cartoon version of Juggalo behavior.
Even that term "pokerize" is so dumb. Like, it's exactly that. These are the kind of guys that would think that was a cool term.
Yeah.
Let's brand our gun violence. Yeah.
He's just a little small character in there, but I love the attorney that Lloyd works with when he's trying to avoid the electric chair.
Yeah, he's so it's obviously a public a public defender who's coming in and just like really down to earth brass tacks, like, hey, guess what? You're gonna die. Like, the only one other person has gotten off on this procedure because he's fast tracked for the electric chair. Because he was accessory to felony homicide. But yeah, like he's real no nonsense about it. What in particular do you like about the attorney character?
Oh, he's just like you said, he's so matter of fact. He's got a whole plan, and he is so he's like, nope, shut up, don't say that. I mean, he just
oh yeah,
like it seems like he's being paid by the hour, and he's like, okay, they only gave me $100, so we got to get this done. Yeah. This is what you're gonna say. I love
the I love the fact that Lloyd is too dumb to understand that he is being coached on how he should testify.
Yes.
Because the lawyer starts saying like, oh, you were afraid of Poke, weren't you? Like, no, we were buddies in this. No, you were afraid of Poke. He got crazy. And you thought I need to go along with this or he's going to pokerize me. Okay. When I say Homer Thompson, I will step on your foot and you will respond, hello.
The miniseries casting for this character as well was masterful.
Oh, Miguel Ferrer is a national treasure. God rest his soul.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's so good. Like, they obviously cast him for the post smartening, for his post flowers for Algernonning, or the height of that rather. The post flowers for Algernon is real grim. They cast him for that. It's hard to read Miguel Ferrer as anybody, as anything besides like this really like sharp smartass, kind of dude. And who knows if that's just because of Twin Peaks or whatever, but yeah, it is inspired casting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But Lloyd ends up in prison, and he, most notably, he ends up in prison during the plague and nearly starves to death. We get the descriptions of him eating live roaches, of eating a rat, trying to eat the rat's tail, but it's too tough. And eventually moving up to eating some portions of a cellmate's leg.
I mean, in fairness, it's not like he was using it.
It was dead meat. Yeah, it's hard to blame somebody for situational cannibalism. Yeah. It's hard to have an awful lot of sympathy for Lloyd, but I've got a lot of empathy.
It really serves to when Flag comes in to save him. Mm-hmm. The glib, joking, glad-handing way that he's like, "Oh man, his leg looks a little thinner over there, doesn't it, buddy?" I mean, it just really heightens. I don't know. It's so ridiculous that he's in here in this jail with his magic and his snapping fingers and his black stones with red flaws. I mean, it's just wild.
Yeah. It's almost like he's blackmailing him because he understands that Lloyd knows blackmail, right? Like, oh, it'd be a shame if anybody found out you ate a dude, playing on the fact that, Lloyd, like anybody, is mortified by what he has been, driven to do. But, Lloyd forever kind of pledges his life to Flag because he would have starved to death in that prison if it wasn't for Flag coming to rescue him. And Flag knows that.
Flag really does draw his three, right? He draws Nadine, he draws Trashy, and he draws Lloyd, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He's got his whole all of his lieutenants.
I guess that makes the trash can man Jake, right?
I think so, yeah. Yep. Oh, plucky old trash can Jake. Yeah. Evan, what's your thought on Lloyd?
I like his introduction, and after his introduction, I kind of forget about him.
Yeah,
he kind of gets sidelined in favor of everybody else, really.
Yeah, I just wish we got more of the Vegas perspective on this, like the glimpses that we get of kind of the ragtag group of people that Flag assembles over there, and the way just like the particular way that his society is run. I want to see that. I want to see that perspective more than we actually get. And I think that a lot of that might be guided by wanting to get more of Lloyd, because he gets infinitely more interesting as he rises to this position of authority. Like, he is probably the most ascendant of these characters in terms of going from a small time criminal to being like the everyday point person for keeping this whole civilization together, right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting line when Glenn says that he thinks that most of the techies are going to go to Las Vegas. I mean, it's not all bad people there. It's people that just like to, I think Glenn says, work in an orderly atmosphere where everything's clearly defined. And
yeah, people who want quick and understandable solutions and order, right?
Right.
Well, like the Flag is getting the engineers, and Mother Abigail is getting the liberal artists, or the just kind of the people who didn't fit in elsewhere,
Yeah.
Flag's introduction itself is very good. That is another quite good chapter, like describing him kind of insinuating his way into and out of these radical political groups. Like he joined a Black Power group and like acted as one of its agitators, and nobody questioned him on that, even though his skin was white. Like just the the way that he walks around with these pamphlets for different ideologies and stuff like that, always being the whisperer in the ear, to incite people to do, to do their worst, is a very interesting idea. And I think also kind of like leads to a little bit of his downfall because, this is him, his time arising. We get him as he is walking across America, and he says like, yes, this is my time. It's arrived now. The plague is here. The wind has changed, and he decides to start trying to levitate. He's never assumed power before. He's only manipulated it. I think that is also one of the big ways that, he sets himself up for a fall. But Flag's whole goal, he goes to an old friend, an old, somebody he used to stomp around with, and, he's dying of the plague, and gets the money and the car that he needs to get to Vegas, in order to set this up. And yeah, he will attract the orderly people, even though he is a representative of chaos, and try to rebuild all the worst parts of the old society. From this intermission about the villains, let's hit our last two parties before we call it a night. Larry Underwood, who King says his fans wanted, if they ever did a movie, to cast Bruce Springsteen as Larry Underwood based on Springsteen's performance in his music videos, which seems incredibly misguided to me.
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all.
I definitely prefer, Larry Underwood as somebody who is not known for that. If you're going to cast somebody, make it an actor, please. Unless you're doing something like Tom Petty and The Postman.
Yeah. When I picture Larry Underwood, I never remember how the character is actually characterized in the book, because all that I can picture is one of the nameless erstwhile Guns N' Roses guitarists who aren't Slash.
You mean the parade of nobodies that came after that came in the Chinese democracy phase?
Yeah, the ones who aren't Slash and aren't Buckethead.
Yeah. It's so weird because when they updated the book for 1990, when this was set in 1978, you could possibly believe that there was somebody who would have a hit single in a song called "Baby, Can You Dig Your Man," which almost sounds like a doo-wop kind of thing. In 1990, that does not sound at all plausible to me. No. Almost specifically because of the Guns N' Roses kind of deal. But yeah, Larry Underwood, he's a singer. He's a musician who happens to have written this song called "Baby, Can You Dig Your Man" that everybody is sick of by the point the book begins. When we're introduced to Flag, he's walking along the road singing it. It's playing everywhere. We get snippets of the lyrics that are playing. And eventually after everything falls apart, I think it's Fran who they're walking and she's talking to Larry and like, oh my gosh, I've got this annoying song stuck in my head. Something, can you dig your man or whatever? And she asks him like, hey, do you remember who sung that? And he says, I have no idea. Like he doesn't take credit for it. But yeah, he has this ascendant, singer, rock and roll star kind of person who, it's hard to believe that he would win a Grammy, but it's easy to believe that people who wanted to make money off of him would tell me it would win him a Grammy. And notably about Larry, he ain't no nice man.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're introduced to him in New York, but it's only, he's only returned home because people are after him because, after he got his advance, he used his money to throw this massive house party with a whole bunch, just all this drugs and alcohol and things like that, and racked up this tab, and he needed to skip town, and basically just kind of welch on his debt. And his old bandmates told him essentially like, yeah, this is just like you. There's something, there's a line that is repeated about him. There's something about you that's like chewing on tinfoil. And like later on, kind of heartbreakingly, his mother says like, oh, you're a taker. There's always been something missing in you. You're not bad. You're just selfish. Like it doesn't make me love you any less, but it just it breaks my heart to see you, to see you doing this. It's hard to like Larry at this particular point in the story, especially when we see him, because we know he's good and he's good intention, but even after he has these these moments, he is still like kind of sexually taking advantage of somebody, like doing a hit and run with a dental hygienist, the person who screams, "You ain't no nice man," and that ends up being his characterization. Like, he does things that he regrets, and he feels very human in that way. But his most interesting thing is the way that he grows and the way that he eventually learns that he has it in him to be responsible for others.
Yeah.
I think it's worth noting about Larry that even when we're seeing him pre-epidemic, he doesn't have a negative intention in him, a negative bone in his body. He doesn't mean to harm anybody, but he's so careless and, like you said, so selfish that these things happen around him, and he's just completely oblivious.
Yeah, it's also never his fault, too. And we all,
yep.
I think what makes Larry work for me is we all either know somebody like that, or we recognize parts of that in ourselves. Like, again, it is very, very human behavior.
That's also what's nice about a book of this length is you would have known who Larry was if you had just seen the dental hygienist throw a spatula at him. You would have known that guy. That guy would have made sense. He would have mentioned that he owed money on his Z28, and you're like, okay, I know this guy. But getting to sit and spend that time with Larry and his mom, the way that Larry goes to her like a little boy, basically, with his head hanging down. I mean, you get so much time to draw these characters.
Yeah. His mom is such a sweetheart too. Like, he comes back unannounced, and like the next day after she gets back from work, like, she has all of his favorite food in the, in the fridge. Like, she's got like a toothbrush there for him and his favorite brand of toothpaste. Like, God bless her heart. And I don't mean that like in the Southern way. Like, it is, she genuinely cares for him, but she is not to the point where she is going to sugarcoat her real opinion about her son, the man that her son has become, like the way he has never really grown up to this point.
Every time I think about Larry, I think about, and I actually tease my father about this sometimes. Every story that your parents have of you, they're never like, oh, remember that nice time you were 17? They're always stories about when you were 0 to 12, say, when you were learning something, you were so cute. It's obviously not very rewarding for Larry's mom to have a 30-some-odd-year-old son.
No. The honeymoon's over.
Yeah.
But yeah, like he is in Manhattan. He's on this island when everything kind of goes to shit. Like, he gets he gets some good money news from LA, comes home to give his mom the good news, but finds out that she's sick. She's got the flu herself, and like between chapters, everything falls apart to the point where like he is in Central Park watching the monkeys in the zoo die. Finding dead bodies in the porta pots, and listening to the doomsayers across the city screaming about monsters that are coming. Like, it's a real bad scene. The way that New York, again, this is the pre-Disneyfication of New York or whatever, the way that it is sketched as like this, kind of prison for everybody to die in. What I keep coming back to is the smell, honestly. And when he meets Rita, she is completely fixated on the fact that, it's high summer in New York and everybody is baking in their high rises, This is scary to me as well. Like, you have, in general, the sense of place throughout this book is very good. But here it speaks to me.
Yeah, New York is definitely not on my top 10 lists of cities to experience a plague in.
No.
Like, I mean, it just, New York is a kind of a communicable disease, like, mecca of sorts. I mean, when you think about every mode of transportation. How many people touch a doorknob there in an average day? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm surprised there was anyone left in New York.
Yeah, you spend, hours of your day in a tunnel where you hold on to a bar that everybody else has held on to.
I feel like even Stu would start coughing after like a few weeks in New York,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He'd be like, wow, I thought I was immune, but after 40,000 exposures, I guess not.
Yeah, no, we're done. Yeah, it's just filing cabinets of the dead. Rita as a character is introduced here. She's a very tragic figure and kind of the last straw for Larry in terms of, people that it's not like he takes advantage of her, but like she shows him how unprepared he is for the realities of what's coming after him and, kind of like helps him rise up, to the occasion. She's kind of this older socialite, that he ends up, kind of like sleeping with. Like he meets her in the park and, she's immune and they decide to, get off of Manhattan. But she, decides, well, my walking shoes might as well be these nice, sandals, these just kind of like very elegant shoes that are, strapped on. Like, no, you need boots. And he loses patience with her over this, but she just is not prepared for this at all. Like,
you mentioned a tragic figure. She really is. I mean, there's a lot to empathize with her as well. I mean, you're probably in your late 50s, early 60s. You've kind of had this affluent lifestyle, and now you're here stuck in New York. And I mean, you're looking at this kid to be the leader, and he ain't no nice guy. I mean,
I can't blame him for losing patience with her. Like, but he also is the one who decided,
absolutely.
Like he decided to fall in with her and said like, hey, let's make a go of this. Like he has to take responsibility for her unpreparedness, and he's just not ready for it.
I guess that's part of what leads him to idolize Harold so much. Like Harold's obviously squiring these people around the country with grace and aplomb, and Larry couldn't even get a rich lady out of New York,
Nope. That scene in the Lincoln Tunnel. Yeah. Again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but just the idea of being stuck under a river like that.
That'd be peak fear, as if somebody in the tunnel in the dark asked me to eat chicken with them. That would be this would be my two big scares from the book in one place.
Oh, it's all coming together. Evan, does anything about the Lincoln Tunnel escape like stick out to you?
The part that's always stuck out, the part that's always stuck out to me, is after they get out and Rita just dies.
Yeah, again, she's not prepared. In a lot of ways, she is prepared because she has just a purse full of tranquilizers.
Yeah, and it is one of the most quiet and unceremonious deaths of a named character in at least in this book. I'm trying to think of another one where it's like she is prepared because she has a much more peaceful exit than just about anybody else. That's always been the part that's been kind of notable about Larry's introductory segment.
Yeah. It's good that we get it through Larry's point of view, as he goes in and discovers her. All I can think of is that line from the original Vacation movie where they discover that the aunt that they're traveling with is dead in the backseat, and they've been driving with her. They thought she was asleep, and Audrey, she looks over like she's screaming after they make the discovery, saying, "Oh my God, a dead person breathed on me." but like Larry keeps beating himself up because he got out of bed, got out of the sleeping bag trying to leave her there. He was going back in to have sex with her, and he beats himself up over that, and he can't even bring himself to bury her.
Yeah.
It's real sad. And him trying to recover from that and being distracted by his grief and getting into a motorcycle accident to the point where when he finally meets Nadine and they're like, hey, let's ride a motorcycle. Like, no, like Larry carries us with him for a long time. Like everything that we've seen up to this point as they, eventually get to Stovington and get the directions to Nebraska, is kind of this parade of tragedies that Larry either rightly or unrightly decides are his fault, that help him grow and help him kind of be, kind of become this person that everybody looks to as a leader, in spite of the fact that he doesn't want it and, didn't ask for it. All right. We should talk about Nadine a little bit, because she is introduced along with Joe, this kind of mute wild boy who I think is introduced by, Larry wakes up and a knife is at his throat. Nadine is taking care of him. Most of her characterization happens later. It relates to the climax of the book in a lot of ways. But she is this, strikingly beautiful woman with, long black hair, but she has this streak of gray down the middle of it. And she denies having had the dreams about the Dark Man. We're also introduced to Lucy Swan, who ends up being the Betty to the Veronica a little bit.
Yeah.
Because in spite of the fact that Larry is attracted to Nadine, they don't end up sleeping together because she has a hang up about it that we're going to find out about here soon enough. We should talk about Nick's party before we round out, because they're the closest to Nebraska and they're the ones who ultimately find Mother Abigail first. Nick Andros he kind of shares main protagonist duties, I think, along with Stu. Like a young, like a young man. Like I think he's in his like late teens or early 20s, and he's a deaf mute. So we have a main character who, cannot hear. He has this disability and communicates with other people entirely by writing notes. And he's introduced, by, terribly having these people beat the shit out of him in this Arkansas town in Shoyo, being rescued by the sheriff. It's hard to get a read on Nick, because to me it seems like his primary characterization is that he is both good and honorable.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot to sink into on that level.
No, and I don't know. And it sounds like it being uncharitable. I don't know how much of that has to do with how much his deafness kind of defines his character, right? Like he generally reacts to things in the appropriate way. He doesn't have an awful lot of like downfalls or hard choices to make. He's just kind of presented as almost the heart of the group because of his blandness. Am I being harsh on that, Autumn?
No. He's an interesting character that I and I guess maybe in an uncharitable sense. Well, backing up a second, depending, I think sometimes on the age that you read this book, I wouldn't say that I was a thinking reader when I was younger. I didn't think about authors as making conscious choices to put these characters in for reasons. I'm like, oh, it's Nick in the book. Mm-hmm. Everything Stephen King did makes sense. Everything's perfect. It's almost like he put Nick in there not to develop him, but just to be, when you look at that old Twilight Zone episode where the guy who loves to read survives the bombing, but then he breaks his glasses. It seems like Nick's character was put in more to be a foil for Tom. Like, how ironic is it that the mentally handicapped boy runs into the boy that's the deaf mute and they can't communicate?
Yeah. It's a real see no evil, hear no evil kind of situation. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, Nick's a good guy. I think that the part that stands out the most for me in these scenes is, that Julie Lowry. She does not get an adequate comeuppance. She needs more of a comeuppance. I would read an extra 100 pages with a comeuppance for Julie. Yeah,
Julie's a straight psychopath is the thing, and I don't mean that like in a ladies be crazy kind of sense. Like, she is presented, she's this young woman that Nick meets after they move on, from Shoyo, who just kind of uses uses sex. I can't say this in a non-shitty way. Uses sex to get what she wants, to manipulate people, and reacts violently when Nick turns her down. He doesn't initially turn her down. He does, sleep with her because that's kind of where we're at with this. But after he sees what she does to, how she treats Tom, he's like, yeah, we don't need you. And that sets her off. Like that statement alone feels like it feels like it is engineered to hurt her as much as possible. And she kind of deserves it, especially because her reaction to rejection is to start firing openly at, these two people.
Yeah. And I mean, telling poor Tom that it's poison when he's just trying to give him medicine for his stomach. I mean, that's the exact type of mean-spirited. I have an acquaintance or two that do mean-spirited April Fool's jokes on Facebook and things like that. And it's always just somebody that's kind of like there's good April Fool's jokes, and then there's real mean-spirited ones where you trick people into thinking that you have a terminal illness or something. Like, that's not a fun goof.
Yeah.
But I think Julie Lowry would think that was a really fun goof.
Like, I gotcha.
That's right up her alley.
Made you think I was going to die, huh? That makes you really think about how much you need me, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Julie Lowry would start a fake GoFundMe just as a goof.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Oh
man, you got right to the heart of it. Like, okay, like we're gonna update this again for 2017. There we go. Oh man, she does get a comeuppance because we have to assume that she's taken out at the end, because she does pop up again in Las Vegas. But yeah, she is. Don't make life harder for other people. Don't tell the mentally handicapped person that the medicine is poison. Like, yeah. The interesting thing about Nick, to me, to get back to this a little bit, like his whole struggle with the sheriff and dealing with the prisoners doesn't feel like it sets up an awful lot. He gets interesting when he actually gets to Nebraska, and he staunchly remains atheist despite all of the evidence of the divine around him. Like, he is one of these people, like even Glenn Bateman, the intellectual, the philosopher, is not immune to the superstition that arises from seeing all of this with his own eyes. Right. Nick, in spite of the reverence that he feels for Mother Abigail, ends up not, kind of like being incredulous still to a certain extent while still going along.'s not a hindrance. He's not like, that's dumb, because of my beliefs, but like that is a part of his characterization, that because of his upbringing, like that's where he's at.
Yeah. He's always going to be a skeptic.
Yes. Which is valuable. Now, we should talk about Tom Cullen too, because Nick runs across him in Oklahoma. He is, and I think he's 40 or something, but he's got the mind and behavior of a child because of his developmental disability. It's so hard to comment on Tom Cullen because I don't have a lot of experience working with developmentally disabled people. So I can't say how much of this is, like a positive and good depiction versus if this is a harmful one. I just don't have a basis in that. So I apologize if I'm either reacting to, the politics of his portrayal, in kind of an outsized way, or if I'm not reacting enough. The good thing about Tom Cullen is, aside from the mystic, for the mystic kind of stuff, where he ends up being this vessel for God in a lot of ways through this auto hypnosis. The good thing about him is that he is purely good. There's nothing like sinister about his presentation. Like he is just a positive force wherever he's at.
How wonderful for Tom Cullen that he grew up with the dad that he did. I mean, there's such a tenderness in the way that Stephen King outlines. I mean, even with Julie with the poison, like, oh no, my dad said any bottle that says this, no, that's not for Tom. It's everything about him just feels so good, like a big fluffy old Labrador, a golden retriever. Like, he's just a pure force of good.
Even the house that he settles down in Boulder, like he eventually turns it into like Pee-wee's Playhouse almost, because he goes and gathers all the stuff. Good.
Yeah, he's got all the toys in the street. I mean, he's adorable.
Yeah. Cute guy. Like he ends up saving Nick's life too. You know, like he knows how to react to a tornado in a way that Nick doesn't. When they're when they're riding their bikes. And Tom is, got this, tremendous affection for Mother Abigail, probably more than anybody else does, because he's been having the dreams. Everybody here has the psychic connection, right? They are receiving this, these CB kind of transmissions. Speaking of CB, they also just in a sentence at the end of a chapter, they meet Ralph Brentner. Yep, Ralph. He wears a feather in his hat. He's from Oklahoma. He's very important to the story. Hi, guys.
Hey, he knows how to work a CB radio. That's his character.
Yep.
Yeah, I was looking at your show notes. I was looking at your show notes, and it's like, oh, they meet Ralph. And it's like, I'm pretty sure there's more than that. I like got up to that point. It's like, nope, they just meet Ralph.
Yep. It's kind of like how they just meet Lucy Swan. Like Lucy Swan is a very important character for Larry's arc, right? Like Lucy is, just categorically a force for good in his life, and she's just kind of an afterthought who is introduced, as somebody for needing to be jealous of.
Yeah. He's so folksy. Like I'm folksy Ralph. I'm the sheriff of getting us all to Boulder.
Hi, I'm the sheriff of getting us all to Boulder. I'm get us all to Boulder. Oh, that dates us. That dates us so much. But it's good. I like it. Ralph is another one of those characters who didn't really thrive in the pre-plague world, but eventually found his niche. Like he ends up being, part of the Boulder Free Zone ad hoc committee. Like he rises to a position of leadership because of his practicality. Whereas before everything happened, he couldn't hold down a steady job because he would find himself, clocking in late and clocking out early. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why I'm a sucker for that part of the story, but I am. But they're all headed to Nebraska because the dreams are in full effect. They've been dreaming of this old woman who, is rocking on this porch. This porch that's up on Jack's, in the middle of these cornfields, and there's this dark force in the corn. And that woman is a 108-year-old woman named Mother Abigail. I mentioned that she is Black because that is part of her history. There's an awful lot in her introduction about, her family rising to prominence in Hemingford Home, the town where they're at, which is where Ben lives when he's an adult in It. Strangely enough.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? But her family rose to prominence because they were the first African-American family to be induced into the Grange, right? And there's this early on scene where, she Mother Abigail plays her guitar and, does a performance at the Grange Hall, and Randall Flagg, the man in black, is there, turning people against her with racial epithets, stuff that I don't really feel comfortable repeating on the show because, even though it's not my words, it's not stuff I feel comfortable saying, but just kind of hounding her from an early age. There's also this uncomfortable description, again, the reference this Onion article about her describing the number of husbands she's had and just the ecstasy of someone coming inside you and the smell that rises up that's like the corn, and the number of great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. It's very strange to see that. It feels like an inappropriate level of detail.
Yeah.
Hey, but
guys,
she still makes her own bread.
Yeah, she still has.
We'll just talk top line. She's 106 years old. She still makes her own bread. That's all you need to know about Mother Abigail.
That's all you know. That's how she introduces herself too. And I still make my own biscuits.
Yeah. It's just like Bob Vance Refrigeration, right? Mother Abigail, Abigail's bread.
Abigail's biscuits. Oh my gosh, the descriptions of the food that she makes, because we meet her as she's as she's making preparation. She knows that these people are coming. She walks 4 miles, at 108 to go get some chickens to fry up for the guests. And the dark man shows up as weasels and takes some of the chickens out of the bags. But as she is preparing this, thinking about all those people who are, who have been eating canned food for, at this point, 3 weeks, coming to fresh homemade food, like my mouth waters in a way that Tolkien's descriptions of food never accomplish for me.
And I just want to remind everybody that I died in the No Great Loss chapter because of canned food. So this would have been really nice if I could have showed up and had some of Mother Abigail's food, but I died.
I mean, to be fair, if you made your own biscuits.
Yeah, true. Yeah. You wouldn't have to rely on the bloated botulism infected Pillsbury biscuits. I see that I picked the one food that actually the can can't bloat because the very mechanism of a Pillsbury can of biscuits is that it pops open. So,
I can assure you that I would have died from a heart attack from it popping open in a grocery that I was trying to loot food from. They'd all pop open at once, and Autumn would stroke out on the floor.
It's like that urban legend of the person who was driving their groceries home, and then they heard a lot of pop, and then they felt up to reach the back of their head, and like, oh my gosh, I feel soft stuff. My brain, like somebody shot me, like my brains are leaking out. They go to the hospital and then say, yeah, you bought some. You bought some biscuits and the can popped, and you're not holding your brains in, you're holding the dough against your head.
That's me.
I definitely heard that urban legend a long time before I read The Stand. And I just remember thinking, even as a little kid, like, why wouldn't you check?
Because you're so terrified. You got to hold your brain in.
You got to do the blood check, though, right? You got to do the blood check.
Yeah.
Am I bleeding?
That's the thing. That's the thing. Is like, why would you go straight to the hospital before doing something like, oh, there's something like there's something wet on the back of my head. Let me see if it's anything that I should go to the hospital for.
You don't know if when you pull your hand away, you're going to pull away the part of the brain that can recognize that the brain is outside the head.
This is brain science 101.
Yeah.
All right, Cole. I'm not a brain scientist.
Well, I mean, quite frankly, you're outmatched here then, because I am.
Oh man, I forgot.
That's right, podcaster and brain scientician.
I look like a real idiot.
Oh, geez. So they arrive at Mother Abigail, and they all take their chance to kind of have their audience. And this sets up a little bit of what her, downfall is, which is pride. She understands that she is acting for God, that she is assembling these forces against the Dark Man. She has had her dreams about going to Boulder, even though nobody wants to get any closer to Vegas than they have to be, in order to set up for their conflict. But she is just so happy to be in this position where she can serve these people. And, that is its own kind of pride in her eyes. And we're going to see that, come to fruition later on in Boulder itself. So they head out. Ralph gets the CB. And, as they are on the road, Mother Abigail dreams of a red eye opening and training on her in the night. And that is the end of what we're covering for this episode. That is a lot of character introductions. That's an awful lot of, talking about ways people have dealt with the plague. From this point onward, the story is relatively linear, which is helpful from a discussion kind of standpoint, because, events proceed and rise to the climax and then reach the end. But I was very happy to get to talk about these characters with you because, like the Dark Tower, these characters loom large in my mind as human figures that I have a lot of affection for, even if I think they're despicable, Harold. Final thoughts from the two of you, from you, Autumn, about this opening part of The Stand where kind of the plague clears everybody out.
This is definitely the most fun part of the book when we are seeing these characters. And I mean, you do fall in love with almost all of them. Even when they're repellent, you still want to keep turning every single page and learning more about even how repellent they are. This half of the book is a little bit less. The action is getting everybody to one place. The second half of the book is what they do once they're there. And I guess it's also, you'll really like the second half of the book if you like reading the minutes of town hall meetings.
Yeah, I'm going to gloss over that quite a bit, actually, because I'm not really that interested in talking about Stu being the first president of the United States.
Let's ratify a constitution.
Yep.
It's just a fantastic book. I think about characters. I think about turns of phrase in here all the time. I mean, I think for a lot of people, MOON, if they've read this book, that spelling something is in just their general, like they probably say it at least twice a year.
Yeah.
It's definitely an earworm kind of book.
I've had a tweet in my drafts that begins MOON, that spells, and I keep changing the second sentence, but I want to make sure that I save it for something worthwhile. I've never been happy with the way I've concluded the joke. So keep an eye out for that when I actually get a hold of it. But that particular, the way that Tom Cullen character quirk pays off is so good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's how I feel about it.
Evan.
Yeah, I definitely think that this first section of the book is a lot of fun, and I really enjoy kind of the scattershot way that King introduces all of these characters and has their paths kind of gradually work towards each other. It feels very much like a prototype for things that he would attempt later with huge stories and lots of characters. And I think that this might actually be my favorite instance of it. Mm-hmm. As I was reading through it this time, I kept thinking back to a book that I haven't read since I was probably like maybe 10 or 11 years old, called The Girl Who Owned a City. I don't know if either of you have read that. But it's about a virus, like it's basically another book about a superflu. It's basically The Stand.
Okay, it's The Stand again.
But it kills everyone in the world over the age of 12.
Okay.
And it's this girl and her younger brother who are just kind of trying to like figure out how to get by, and there's Lord of the Flies style gang wars happening, and they're realizing that there's no adults manning the like power plants, and so the electricity is failing everywhere, and like we have to figure out how to do all this stuff, and there's no one who can show us. And it was written in like the mid 70s, so it's not like they could just go on the internet.
Right.
And I haven't thought about that book in a really long time, and I kept kind of flashing back to it this time around, and it really kind of makes me want to sit down and take a break from Stephen King and read some young adult literature.
Yeah. Huh. Wow. Yeah, that definitely is a book cover from the 70s. Yeah, written by O.T. Nelson. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. The mayor of the flies.
But yeah, it's another thing that I noticed, and this isn't really like my overarching thoughts, but Larry Underwood's hit song, I noticed two other parallels that I hadn't before. The first one is when you guys were talking, is I realized that actually the perfect person to play Larry Underwood would be Bill Nighy reprising his role from Love Actually.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
But also I realized, there's a book that I really, really love called Futuristic Violence in Fancy Suits by David Wong, who most people know from Cracked. Okay. And it's such a good book, but there's something that I realized reading through it this time that's totally a nod, or reading through The Stand this time, there's something in that book that's totally a nod to The Stand, which is there's this quote unquote hit song that keeps getting referenced in odd places, and that people express feelings ranging from confusion to annoyance toward, except instead of being called Baby Can You Dig Your Man, the song is called Butt Show, parentheses, and I Don't Charge.
Butt Show and I Don't Charge.
Yeah. So that's another really good book that actually that's kind of like the opposite of The Stand in a weird sort of way. That I could talk about that book for a really long time, but I won't. Yeah. Stand is fantastic, even though there's no sword fights in it. And
7 out of 10.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. I feel like I've said an awful lot of what I, have to say. Like, I'm kind of done with post-apocalypse stuff anyway. I think that, like, between The Stand and The Road, like, that's about as much as I want to get, That said, going back through this, and I'm reading it through audiobook. This is the second time I've read it this summer. I guess it's still technically summer. No, it's summer for one more day. Shit. Okay. Yeah.
It was 93 degrees today. Do not tell me it's not summer.
There we go. I don't mean to get into semantics there, but I did. No. I read it, just a couple of months ago, and I'm reading it again now to get back up to speed so I can talk about it. It's still great. I'm noticing things that I haven't noticed before. It is a big book, and that can turn a lot of people off. Of something. Like, if you're coming to this from the mini series, like, that is perfectly understandable, because who in there and who has time for a 1,200 page book or a 1,400 page book? I get it, but like, there is a lot there, and a tremendous number of characters who you can really get to know because of how much it lays things out. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about the rest of their journey. So thank you so much to you two for sticking around. This episode was longer than usual. I really appreciate you taking the time and offering your insights on this. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. I'm going to have a different panel assembled to talk about the remainder of the book. Probably going to do another, kind of like abbreviated kind of version of this. Like, every bullet point that I had in my notes here was like a chapter summary. Yeah, we covered 45 chapters of what we talked about here, which is absurd. But yes, we'll be back there, and then after that, we are resuming our Dark Tower coverage with Wizard and Glass, talking about the first chapter, Riddles. Very excited to do that. Wizard and Glass is such a fun book. I know I've said that every time it's come up, but we look forward to having you there. If now is a good time to tell your friends about the show, to get them up to speed, to tell them, hey, listen to this. We really appreciate it. Also, Patreon, you hear about all this at the beginning. And thank you so much for listening. I have been Cole Ross, and also here with
Autumn Greer
and Evan Jones Thorne.
Where can people find you online?
You can find me online on Twitter at Mrs. Greer. That's MISSUS. If you'd like to hear me talk a little bit more about Stephen King, I was also recently on the Laser Discotheque podcast, where Levi and Amelie watch movies on Laserdisc. They recently watched The Running Man, which was loosely based on a Stephen King story.
What a good movie.
And also recently I was on the Going Digital Digimon podcast with Duckfeed Slack friends, Davide, Sporky, and Garrett.
I need to ask them if I can crash their party, because that sounds like fun.
It was an absolute blast. They are a delight.
Fantastic. Evan, how about you?
I'm on Twitter at Mr_Harder. That's MISTER. No relation to Autumn's Twitter handle at all. That's purely coincidental. You can also find me on Mastodon, except I created an account and I don't really know how it works, and I'm never going to go there again, so probably don't waste your time looking for me.
What the fuck is Mastodon?
It's like Twitter, but worse.
Okie doke.
Instead of you don't tweet, you toot. Ugh. And it's open source, and none of it makes any sense.
Yeah. Weird.
So yeah, don't look me up there, but you can find me if you have to. And yeah, I unfortunately, the Very Good Serial Reviews Instagram has been dormant for a while, but I really would like to kind of get that going again. Yeah. So if anybody has some really high quality serial submissions that they would like reviewed, please tweet them at me.
Yeah. Please do. That is a very fun experiment that you did. And if we learned anything from The Stand, even the stuff that is dropped can be picked back up. Hopefully by the right hands. Yeah. I've been Cole Ross. You can find me at Cole Ross on Twitter. That is KOLEROSS. Also on other shows on the network here, I'm also doing game streaming again, streaming horror games. That'll be of interest to folks who like Stephen King. That is at twitch.tv/Duckfeed.tv, and that is for my Hex Crank horror game coverage that I do. It's a little side project
definitely,
that I've left.
Definitely check that out too. Cole's horror game playthroughs are a lot of fun and minimal screaming.
Yeah.
So if you're a grown-up, it's like YouTube that is for grown-ups.
Yeah. That can also be found at youtube.com/DuckFeedTV. We've been going for a long time. Let us cut this off and say the usual thing we say at the end here. Long days and pleasant nights.